started being participating in a little workshop of a French photographer and artist that I really appreciate, David Fati. And he experimented in an early version of first version of Midjourney and of DALL-E, and he showed what was possible. And that gave me an overview. And he also recommended to get on the waiting list for DALL-E 2 as a beta tester. And I did. Yeah, I applied with 3 different email addresses, and I got in before him even. And then I got hooked. It was fascinating. Yeah, it was suddenly artistic freedom. Yeah, you put your imagination into words, and then you get images, and you work with them. And it is addictive. My partner got a diagnosis of cancer, and we spent a lot of time in doctors' offices and hospitals, and the whole treatment was like 1.5 years. Everything's fine now. But all of this happened in parallel. So the only way for me to be creative was to play around with AI in the little breaks I had, sitting at hospitals and doctors' offices, on my mobile. It's luck, that the stuff you have been doing for 25 years, suddenly you can use all of it. But life sometimes is like this. In the past, you think, I don't know if this was a wasted time, and I don't know, that was a dead end. But if you keep your eyes open and you're open to whatever happens, there are moments where you can use this to make the difference.
Welcome to the show, Boris.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the next 1-2 hours.
I met you a few years ago when I was doing research for my thesis, and I was kind of researching artificial intelligence image makers, and your name came up in conversation, and I remember diving into your website, looking at your work, and I was like, I have to talk to you. And so I think at that time I only got 30 minutes with you. So I'm really excited because a lot has happened since that conversation. The Sony Awards and some of these other things that have happened in your world, that you're now traveling, all over the world giving talks on AI image making. And so I'm really excited to see kind of that development. And I'm also excited about my audience getting a chance to get to know you and how they get to also see your work, how it evolved, how you were an image maker before. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, my pleasure. Let's get started.
Of course. So before we get started, jumping into work and diving into some of those big questions, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
I'm an artist. For 25 years, I called myself photomedia artist because photography was always the foundation of what I was doing. And from there, it went into moving images and installation. But I actually started with drawings, and I wanted to become a painter. Many of my artist friends have been painters, and I got accepted into art school because of my drawings. It just happened while I was studying that I ended up in the class of photography. Photography in the early days was just a side project because drawing was a very lonely job. You're doing it all at home, listening to music, drinking wine. It was the early idea of bohemia, but it's lonely. And in photography, I could approach people. I could ask them to be models in staged photos. And this is what I started with 17. And while I was an art student, I just thought, well, let's go to the professor of photography and show him what I was doing. And he loved it immediately. And because I was not attached to any class at that time, he said, you're coming into my class. 2 weeks, we are going to have a week in Prague. And so it became photography more and more. And drawing less and less.
Wow. I've seen that connection between painting and drawing with a lot of photographers that I've talked to. It's almost like image making is something that goes deep down. It goes even beyond, kind of a camera, and a camera is kind of just a way of getting to the image that you have in your mind. And I'm kind of curious, were you always artistic? Were you drawing as a kid? And was it kind of a family thing, or were you kind of the only one in your family doing it?
It's not a family thing. I just started and
Just did?
Loved it. Yeah. I was one of those kids that don't go out onto the street playing soccer. Yeah? I was staying in-house, reading books and living in my own world. And this is how it started. And then later, when I was 17, 18, 19, it also helped me to make sense of everything. Yeah, all the crises you go through growing up and broken hearts. Yeah, I used art as a form of expression, of put those emotions somewhere. And I always wanted to become an artist. Yeah, after I finished school in Germany, you had to do military service or a replacement after passing an ethical test. Then you can do social work. Yeah, going to hospital, work with elderly people. And so I did. And in that time, I decided that I wanted to become an artist and to study art. And I made a compromise with my parents that I'm studying art in combination with a second topic and a teaching degree. So I have a proper degree. As an artist, that diploma that you get is worth nothing. Yeah, friends of mine had just studied art and had a diploma and got later to the doll office. They said, "Where should we place you?" Yeah, there is no job profile. It turned out to be an advantage because of me reading so many books. I was interested in philosophy very early and to understand what it's all about. I started reading Nietzsche and I couldn't understand it, but it seemed to be interesting to me. And so I combined the two, and it was very useful to live in both worlds. For me, it was always trying to understand what all of this is about. And when I was younger, I thought, I will get an answer in philosophy, or I will get an answer in art. And now I know that it's just helping me to ask more precisely, and that for the most interesting questions, there are no answers.
It's almost like you reveal another side to complexity when you ask good questions. There's rarely a black and white answer on anything. And that's fascinating. So do you ever go back to Nietzsche? Do you ever read it again?
Every 10 years.
Yeah, same.
And every time I see something different, and
it's true.
My perception, my opinion, my view changes, and so the way I understand what I read is changing.
Yeah. Some of my favorite books are really dense. I like the book that I don't understand. Partly due to the fact is it's going to stay on my shelf and I get to read it again. I've noticed, you spend 5-10 years to take a break on it and then you jump back, you're a different person. I say I'm a different Patrick now. And so then the book actually makes sense. It's almost try to read it as a teenager. You haven't really had heartbreak yet. You haven't had 1,000 no's. You haven't had, what I mean? All those things that actually make you question your existence. But then once you finally do, you jump back in and it makes a lot of sense. Your work, especially when I was diving into it, you were doing some AI work, and it was almost like you were studying the subconscious in a way, this subconscious desire and these kind of, almost Freudian-esque kind of things. You know what I mean? So is that what you mean by kind of this these kind of blending of two worlds, like philosophy and art? Talk to me a little bit about that.
My drive or my motivation to study both subjects was to understand what this is all about, and to understand the human condition. And that has been my theme ever since. But it took some time for me to become conscious of that. Yeah, when you start as an art student, you are like a leaf in the wind. Yeah, you are blown to all different directions, which is actually a Nietzsche quote. And then when you are older, the power dynamic is changing. Then you are the wind, and you can use ideas, and juggle with them. And just in my mid-30s, I realized what all my work was about, and just by accident. And I stumbled, I think it was Botanical Garden in Australia, and there was a Chinese garden and a yin and yang explanation. And I studied 2 years of Chinese philosophy as well in Germany. So I knew the concept, but then they had a list of elements. What is yang? What is yin? Yeah. What is yin? What is yang? So in our Western world, we make it very easy just telling it's female, male. It's much more complex. And the yin elements are the night, the sea, the female, and it adds on. And the male element is fire. And then I realized in the photography I was doing that time, night photography, and I can show it later, it was 90% yin. And then I thought, how can it be that I'm not interested in the other part that is possible? And what is it all about? So I started to research, and then I discovered Carl Gustav Jung. And for him, yin was also the symbol for the unconscious part of our mind. And then I really got into psychology 18 years ago. And that was getting me onto another level of what I was actually doing. So it's no coincidence that I'm now married to a psychologist.
Congratulations, by the way. You were just married. And so I know when we were scheduling this, I was like, oh my gosh, he just got married. So congratulations. I want to say that to you.
Thank you.
So you married your work is what you just said. So it's like,
well,
huh?
if you talk to partners of artists who are not artists themselves, all of them will say something like this. For me, art is much more than work. What I realized later in life, it is my source of energy. I need to do it to get a certain balance and to be content with my existence. For others, it's doing sports or helping others. So for me, it's creating art. It's my source of energy.
Yeah, that is something. When we look at the work, you can definitely get a feel for that energy. You can kind of see that kind of manifest itself. And I'm kind of curious a little bit about your inspirations. Is there any particular artist out there that you find quite interesting, people that inspire you? And I know we kind of talked about some of the books and philosophy and stuff like that, but
many, and all of them had an interest in psychological questions. And even if there was no psychology officially existing in that time. And that goes from Hieronymus Bosch to the symbolism to painters like Munch, to everything that later ended up in surrealism. But there's a long history before surrealism that was interested in these topics. It's just that at that time, there was no discipline called psychology. And even the surrealists and psychology didn't match. Yeah, there's a story about Freud and Dali meeting. I think it wasn't a good meeting. And today, my most, that's the history of painting. And then the 20th century, it was more movies that inspired me. And I remember when I was 18, I watched Peter Greenaway's The Cook, the Thief, his wife and her lover. And that was mind-blowing, yeah, to end up in a small town cinema. I don't know if you have seen it. If not, watch it. It's a Gesamtkunstwerk, yeah. It's everything coming together, and there are things happening where you say, yeah, okay, you can be that free in movies that everybody is dressed in red, and the woman is in red, and she goes to the bathroom. The bathroom is in white. And then suddenly her dress is also white. Yeah, but you realize, it's not about our idea of reality. Yeah, I can create my own world with this. But for what purpose? So in movies, it was Greenaway for sure. What I also like in movies is the Swedish director Roy Andersson. His very stage sets are like still images. And he doesn't use camera movement. It's more like theater, a set. In photography, Roger Ballen blew me away when I saw him, his work first. And he still does. Yeah, I've been knowing him for 10 years now. I worked for him as an assistant. I have contact with him regularly, and he's one of the living, inspiring artists of our times that are very important for me. And the other one is also a filmmaker, and he did many things, comic books, writings, and that's Alejandro Jodorowsky, who is based in Paris. And he's now in his early 90s.
Huh. Didn't you take a class with Roger Ballen? Like a workshop? You kind of worked with him, or?
I took a workshop 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Went to Ireland. It was 2 days. And during lunch break, all of the other participants, they went in a group to go somewhere and eat. And he was sitting there alone. And I thought, well, maybe I just say hello and have a chat. And then it was just great to ask him, things I always wanted to know about his work. And he seemed to like my work. And then I was bold enough to ask him if I ever do a book, if he would be writing something to it. And he said, yes, but give me half a year lead time. And I never managed to get this book done. Yeah, I tried twice. And then years later, 5 or 6 years later, a friend of mine arranged a workshop with him in Berlin. And I said, participated in one of his. It's great. And he always needs an assistant. If you need one, I know how it works. And so I became the Berlin assistant for Roger's workshop. And part of what he teaches is also marketing. And I have been working since the end of my studies as a freelancer in digital marketing. That means after finishing my studies and getting a teaching degree, the new economy started, and I was fascinated by the internet. And then I somehow managed to grow with it and became a freelancer that was working in the industry just like a week per month. And the rest of the time I was doing my art. And then Roger realized that I know more about digital marketing than he does. And he invited me to be his assistant for that. And I did it. And it's great to be part of that traveling circus. Before the pandemic, I went with him to Paris. He had a museum show there in the Art Brut museum next to Montmartre. And if you go back to his Instagram account, most of the archived stories are shot and recorded by me. And so I could learn from him a lot just by observing, what he does, how he works. And he's great. Yeah, he's a great artist. He's a great human being. He's like the uncle I always wanted to have. I can only rave about him. Yeah.
I remember talking to you, and I remember you telling me about him and some of your early experimenting. You were trying to recreate one of his images, the twins image. And, even, when you start looking at that work, Roger Ballen's work, it's really quite interesting. It's kind of striking. And I'm curious, and this was a question I never got to ask you back then, is what was the big thing you learned from him, do you think? Do you think there was, I know there's probably not just one thing, but was there anything that just like that was empowering, maybe some kind of thing you got from him that was impactful on you?
Well, I think just that he appreciated what I was doing, and openly said so and commented on Instagram, was very important for me. Yeah, if you have like your hero telling you that what you're doing is great, that's an empowerment. Yeah, and then also to see how he is dealing with people. He's a gentle person. Yeah, he has a sense of humor that not everybody sees, but you just need to look. Yeah, the way he does his talks. He has a certain style that is not 100% identical. Yeah, with him as a private person, I could say. Yeah, so he really gets into a lecturing persona. And his approach, he really knows what he wants and what he does not want. And that's something that is very important. Yeah, also if you collaborate with others, to be open about your position, but also to be able to give reasons, and to explain.
It's when you were talking about him, he knew exactly what he wanted and kind of going from there. And I think this is a great segue to kind of talk about the evolution of your work. You said you did staged photography for a very long time before you started to kind of get into AI image making and so on. And so talk to me a little bit about that evolution, how you got started. What were some of those early subjects that you were really exploring? I know you kind of teased a little bit to it, previously, but kind of take us into that evolution, and then we'll slide into looking at some of the work.
I just started photographing my girlfriend, my friends, and then staging images, looking for unusual places. Today, you would say lost places in my neighborhood, and going there, and the rest was improvisation. And it was all black and white when I started, and I still was all analog. So if I go back to that work, the negatives are all scratched because I had no idea what I was doing there, and but they were strong. Yeah, today I understand why the professor of photography at the first art school I went to wanted me to be in his class. At that time, I had no idea what I was doing. I just liked it. And it took me 6 years to move from black and white to color photography, because I had this painterly idea, that the composition needs to work. And the only way I could make it work was then moving to night photography, where it's much more controlled, where I always started with a given light and then composed the rest around it. And that took some time. And in between, I was doing different experiments and different works. And it developed slowly. But the interest that I had, the human condition was always the same. Yeah, it just took time for me to realize. And that's something that I'm now telling art students, to speed up that process. Look at all the influences you had. What did you like in literature, music, visual arts, movie, whatever? Look at all your attempts to be creative. Yeah, many of us do play an instrument and stop, or write and stop. And then, why did you start? Why did you stop? Why did you start something else? Yeah, ask your friends and family, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And create this mind map out of it. And then you will see connections. And then as a student of art, you pick those connections that have been existing unconsciously already and make them your conscious topic. And that is going to speed up the process to become aware of what drives you. If you don't do it, you need 35 years minimum, of course.
But the journey's kind of fun, right? It's
always. It's only about the journey. There's nothing left.
Yeah.
We never know if we arrive and where. And often we arrive somewhere that wasn't planned at all.
Yeah. Well, and, so many of us are in a hurry to kind of get to the end, and I think so much of, we're going to get to look at your work, and kind of how where the images and stuff like that. And maybe that's a good time to kind of slide into that. We can take a look at that right now if you would like.
Yeah.
We can jump right in and kind of look at some of that. You're going to take us through some of the early stuff, right? Because I want people to see your photography, because I was quite a big fan of that. I love the AI stuff. It was my thesis, of course. That's what I was doing, but I'm definitely want our audience to kind of get you as the total artist, the media artist that you are.
It's all connected, and I can share a presentation that I have recently prepared. So this is my early work I just mentioned with family and friends. Black and white, negative, analog. On the right side, it's my father. And he gave me his camera when I was interested in photographing. And I had no idea how it was working. He said, you need to have the shutter speed of 60, 30. Sometimes it works, because otherwise it's going to be out of focus or blurry or shaky. And so I did. And it took me some years to understand what else I can do with a camera. And this is how I started, with those black and white images. And this I showed the professor at my art school, and this was the reason for him to take me into his class.
Yeah, these are not those. Let's go back to those. These are not what people first start out with. You have great framing. Number one, that image on the right of your father with those shears is brilliant. Yeah. I love that. Your composition's so strong, and you said you kind of are using your sensibilities from painting.
Yes,
right?
My way into photography happened by coincidence. When I was 17, we did a trip with our school, and a friend of mine had a very expensive camera, and he photographed all kind of nonsense, in my opinion. And then there is a statue of Goethe and Schiller in Weimar, and they are holding this kind of crown. Yeah? And I told him, can you shoot the faces of the two from the bottom through that crown? Mm. And he did. And later he did a slideshow and invited us to come. And I said, I like that picture. And then he said, I'm not surprised that you like it, because you told me to shoot it. And then I thought, well, maybe I should try it myself. And this is how I got started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with 17.
Wow. What kind of camera? I'm just kidding. You said it was an expensive camera. Was it like a Hasselblad or something?
No, expensive it was. was the camera of my friends. My father had a very cheap analog mirror camera. It wasn't nothing fancy. Yeah,
I love them. It's interesting. You could proceed. Go as you wish.
Yeah. And then when I studied in Mainz, I had no friends and family. So I thought maybe I need to be the model myself. And because the art school had studios, maybe do some kind of studio work that I've never done in the past. And it was not very professionally, like the backdrop was a blanket for my bed, yeah. And then objects I created myself, and that was a work about love and sex. I've done all that stuff. I think it was important for me to be in front of the camera, yeah, to know like how it feels like to model, but to be in front and behind the camera at the same time was something that I didn't enjoy because I couldn't really compose an image. Yeah, it was less freedom than what I had before, shooting at different locations. So this way of photographing didn't last that long. And then I was teaming up with another art student, and we did several works together out in a given location. And we created our own way of working. It was called the Splendid method. We chose a certain topic, and we started with horror movies. Yeah, so we went to the video shop where you could rent videos, and that was still VHS. And we had not been interested in watching a whole horror movie. We just had a variety of movies, and we put them in the player, and then we clicked on fast forward. So somewhere in between the movie, without knowing the story, we stopped and we watched a minute, and then we improvised over that minute we saw. And we did that with a couple of different topics and subjects. And the last work we did was the apocalypse from the Bible. We cut it into pieces, so you had 2 or 3 lines of text. And then we went to the North Sea, where you have high tide and low tide. And with low tide, it looks like a desert. And we had 2 friends, and then we just improvised there with whatever we found on the beach. Like in that big image, it was a wing of a bird. And one of us is always in front of the camera as well, and the other behind. So the one that was shooting could concentrate on the framing and the image, and the one that was also the model could entertain the guest models. And that is something that I liked and that I did at the end of my studies. And then moving to Berlin, I was photographing alone in the streets at night. It was the first night photos, but I also did experiments. And this is a work, I show you the installation first to tell you how it was made. At the end of the 90s, I bought my first video camera. It was a mini DV. It was so expensive. I think today it would be like 16,000 euros. And it was 9,000 Deutschmark at that time. And I got an award money that went into it, and I had to pay it off later. And it recorded digital video with 756 pixels. And you could also have still shoots, like a photo option. And I worked with this for a long time. And the beauty of working like this was that it didn't cost anything. It was my first digital camera. And I spent a whole summer, it was very hot in Berlin, as a tourist on boats, going along the lakes and rivers in Berlin and shooting the people that are on the side of the river. And if you have been in Berlin and around, there's a lot of nudity. People are not afraid to go swim naked. And I was moving on that boat. I was a voyeur, and I only had like 1 or 2 shots at what I was seeing on the riverside. And because of the distance, I had to zoom in And that created this blur. Yeah, it's like a Gerhard Richter painting for poor people. And I liked that. I liked the mystery of what was happening there. And I created a new version of this year for a retrospective. And what you can see is the aspect ratio changed, because the initial aspect ratio of that old video is 4:3 of power.
They were 2003 was, and in those early digital cameras, I remember those. That's when I first started playing one of those mini DVs. But I love the digital zoom. But go ahead, continue. I apologize.
And here I made it more widescreen, more 16:9, also because of the frames I already had. And I use AI, and here you can see what AI can do. It analyzes the structure of the image, and it just continues to the left and right. So you wouldn't be able to tell what was actually shot on mini DV and what was generated.
Wow, interesting. And I know what you did last summer is also a very popular movie around that time too.
Yeah. Because many of those pictures, they look strange. You don't know what are those people doing. And then for my early attempts of night photography and other works, I only worked at night for a decade. And I have 2 series, the poems with an older Nikon, and then later other poems with a Canon, a different format, and where other poems have titles. The poems only have numbers, but except that and the aspect ratio, it's the same approach. And what you can see here is they all look like staged. They all look like out from a movie, but the only one that is staged is the one on the left bottom. Everything else photographed. You could even call it street photography, but because I have a different interest, I don't do so. As a street photographer, you want to show what is happening in a certain place. Yeah, what do people do? It's about authenticity. And I always wanted to transform what is in front of my lens into a timeless symbol of the human condition. So it's not important who is it, when did it happen, what is actually happening. And that transformation of the material in front of the camera took some time for me to learn. I give you an example to demystify the image, which I only do from time to time. But here we are talking to photographers, and I want to explain my process. The image on the top right here. If you zoom in more closely, I always also have that image online. You see there is a couple in the center of the image. Let me see if we can do that here. It's a man and a woman, not that old. You see 2 faces here. And that is a roller coaster. And I did like that shadow behind that looks like a wolf, like a fairy tale. Yeah? And then you have that tree and there are no leaves. So it is kind of like playing with those archetypes. But actually it was a Christmas market in the near to Berlin Alexanderplatz. And the background that has this purple color was the wall of a very awful shopping center. And but I was seeing the potential of changing this into something else, and so I did. And the same thing is down here, talking about fire. This is one of my few Yang images. It looks like the crowd is admiring and photographing this giant, and it's kind of like violent fire, whatever, surrounding. But it's not. It's just the beauty of photography and long exposure. That giant is not standing in front of the people. That person is standing between the camera and the people. And because he was moving, a light got through and the perspective changed. So I was using the means of photography to change those things. And then I was looking out for events that gave me the opportunity to be the silent guy photographing. That was a very boring, awful event. What you can still see in the background is water fountains. So they had water fountains, light projections to the greatest hits of the last 100 years. So you can imagine Madonna, Rolling Stones, Beatles, whatever. Yeah.
Sure.
That was the soundtrack while I was shooting that picture.
I was kind of blown away by it. It's got a, it's almost like you have this almost supernatural kind of very cinematic sci-fi kind of feel to it. It feels like a lot of those films you watch, where they're using in-camera tricks in order to kind of capture these, like, I'm curious about the role of storytelling in your work. Are you trying to tell a story, or are you trying to take us on a journey through these images? Or
I know that through portfolio reviews and the festivals, everybody's looking for stories.
Sometimes.
No. I once had a portfolio review with a guy who was looking at the picture, and he said, "So what's the story? What's the story?" And I said, "There's a reason why it's called poem. Poem is open for interpretation, and you need to be an active part in it. It's not like I tell you the story." And it's a different approach. But we can make it very generally. Like in general, still most people look at work and think either what's the story or what does the artist want to tell me. And I think this is boring and nonsense, and people should stop. But we are trained, to ask those questions, because when we enter an exhibition, you have an introductory text where the curators show or tell us what to see. And then you go into the exhibition and you are looking to find what you have read before. And I think this is destroying the whole experience you can have with art. For me, the better question is, what is an image making to me, with me? What memories, ideas, feelings are triggered? Am I attracted by it? Am I appalled? Why? So a strong artwork for me is an invitation to an inner journey, and poems do that as well. And this is why I called those series poems, to be sure that it's not a story. And the one portfolio reviewer I had, he just didn't get it. So that was one of the portfolio reviews where I said, well, doesn't make sense to continue. Maybe we should stop here. And
nice to meet you.
Yeah, because I paid him anyhow. Yeah, he got very angry and was personally insulted. But it was bullshit. Yeah, if you're looking for a story, and I tell you, I'm not interested in stories. The story is something that you need to create in interaction with the poem. And if you don't get it, what can I do to explain it to you?
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. You're not the only person that I've heard that from. I recently had someone that was, he says, I don't tell stories like that. I make one frame and I put as much information as I can into it. And I said, you're writing poems. That's what you're doing. And the fact that you're like kind of doing the same thing, but in a very kind of cinematic way, I think that bottom right image, the effect that it was able to create, I'm telling my own story in that. I find myself kind of inventing a narrative behind it. And that's what makes it so strong and fascinating to me. I immediately go to heaven and hell, look at that one, like these little, anyway, but it's just it's so good. And the bottom right one here too is another, maybe there's something about the bottom right for me. Maybe I'm
maybe
analyzing my subconscious here.
And the main task I had here was either really to find places, opportunities, often events, at night, where I knew it was a situation for me to shoot images because people come there for a different reason. Nobody is looking at me. Yeah, I'm the silent guy dressed in black, and people often don't see me. And if they see me, they think I'm part of the team. Or if you travel, you need to take a camera without you, and then you need to just wander the streets and see what's going to happen. But two ways of to work. But it took me that much time, like nearly 15 years, to be able to create those images that look like staged, but only using the tools of street photography. And that is something that also portfolio reviewers didn't understand. When I showed them my different ways of working, they said, why don't you only show images that are staged? Or why don't you only show images that are non-staged? And then I responded and say, well, you see the images in front of you. Please pick what is staged, what is non-staged. And they all failed. And this is, and that is, you see, this is why I mix it. Is it really so important? It's more important what the image does to you, than how it was produced.
What kind of genre of poetry do you feel like you're making here? Do you feel like it falls in a genre for you personally?
Well, what kind of genre of poetry?
It could be inspiring. It could be thought-provoking. It could be stories of love. It could be, those are some of our favorites, the ones that tell me horror stories. I love those.
I do have problems with genres.
Yeah, okay. You don't want to be put in a box at all.
I don't know. Well,
no,
of course you can. But something I'm still trying to achieve, and in some projects it's more obvious than in others, is to combine contradicting elements, where you say, oh, it's kind of creepy, but at the same time it's kind of funny, or it's kind of relaxing, but at the same time there's an unease, so the positive and the negative, if I can get this both into an artwork 50-50, that is something I'm aiming for. I was still not able to get there. Usually it's one side more stronger than the other.
Wow.
Yeah. So more examples from that series, and it's shot all around the globe, and but 50-60% in Berlin, because this is where I live, and I have certain places to go where life always surprises me. And then I started to make installations to create work that is more open and that is immersive. So you get there and you are part of it. It's a different world. It's combining photography and video, the lovely wallpaper. That is like an art fair, so there's a limitation to it. I love to work with rooms and different architecture, and I've been doing this for 8 years now, 9 years, and I still love it. And it's part of most of the exhibitions I do.
Are you trying, when you do an installation, is your goal immersive? Do you want people to be pulled into your world?
Yeah, because what I didn't like at a certain point in time is the conventional way of presenting images. They are all framed identical in the same size, and they are hung in line. So you walk from left to right and lead. And what I wanted to do is to have, here's an example of that installation, to have different sizes, smaller and large, acting. And then it means sometimes you need to come close to be able to see it. But sometimes you need to step back. some of them are hung very low. So you need to go down onto the floor, or very high. So you need to go onto your toe tips. So your bodily movement in the exhibition is differently. And this is what I'm going to continue. I think that's how it should be.
It makes a lot of, you can kind of see that in your current stuff, the way you do your installations with your current work. I'm kind of seeing a connection there, but I don't want to give away the goose too yet. So
yeah, so some examples of installation work, how it's done. Yeah, I've done a lot of videos then after the poems, where I kind of felt, okay, I think it's closing time for that period in my life. So what do I do now? And I just found weird people, artists, performers by accident. Like her, she's a Brazilian performance artist, Kupalua, I found in an off space in Berlin performing. She had this weird helmet, like a disco ball, and there was a laser on top that was shining on her, and she had this kind of like fake breasts, with 3 breasts, and the nipples were mirrors. And she was also wearing a butt plug with a mirror, and a friend of her was having a green laser pointing to all the mirrors being reflected. And then I was there and I said, yes, this is Berlin. This is where I'm living here. And later I met her at the birthday party of mutual friends, just by accident. And I said, I loved what you were doing. Yeah. And I tried to find you on the internet, and the only stuff I find is shaky mobile recordings. So are you interested in doing something together? And she said yes. And let's see if that video is playing. Maybe, here's an excerpt. Then we did a shoot, studio surroundings, with the laser and a friend and another Brazilian artist who does laser shows. And there was a laser coming from the top, and the frequency it creates was interfering with the frequency of the camera. So it creates spirals, if you are looking at the whole video. And I did it in 2019, and everybody loved it. And because of that video, I had more performers from Brazil that were touring in Europe, saying, can we do it too? Something similar. So I had for some time people that just come and they created their own bodies with latex, their new genitals. And I created a series of videos with them. That was very interesting. You could find it online. I could talk about this for half an hour, very funny stories. But what I always did, like since I was a student in 25, was collaborations. And that also got me into this idea of the collective unconscious, of Jung. What do we share across times and across cultures? And as a student, philosophy had that approach. I studied European philosophy, Chinese philosophy. Then I was a guest student in India. And that was also driven by the idea is, what do we have in common as humans? That is not like culture and nurture. So working with other people was always something that inspired me, because it is about finding the strength of the partners. What can you do best that I can't, and vice versa? And how can we use this to create something that is bigger than each single person? And by accident, through another artist friend of mine, Saka Protik, I found Tanvir Taolet in Bangladesh. And we are collaborating since 7 years now. And what we did is not photographing anymore, but using our archives. His work has similarities to mine in the past, but my body of work was much larger because I'm 15 years older. And we uploaded the images on Drive, and then each of us could download and do whatever we wanted with them. And Tanvir was really working hands-on, like cutting them into pieces, putting acid on top, putting them out on the street. I don't even know what he does. And when people ask us, how is that picture created? The answer is, nobody knows. I only know my part. He only knows his part. And then later I use all of this and create an installation. So the installation part comes from me. And we did a couple of installations, also two in India, where it's really immersive, printing on flags and objects. And last year we collaborated with AI. So him and I plus AI. And then you have images like those. And the titles are always like very funny and ironic. And what's the title of this work? It's something about eternity. So I have these people drifting into nothingness, and an old man, and it's all like bubbles, like that had been an ancient Baroque symbol for the fleetingness of life, and it's all like coming out of that nude bottom of the lady. So that's something we do. On the left is the end of all meaning. On the right is the sinner and the cheater. And that is a beautiful collaboration because we have the same interest, which is existential, but our background differs. And to put it all together is something that I like. And here you see again, the installations become more and more immersive and much more stuff to use and to explore. And that was something I did in Arlen 21 that was self-organized, and that took 2 weeks to install.
Wow. It's extremely, it's like you love saturated, heavy colors, lots of contrast. What do you...
That was something that in Germany people disliked, because there was one photo magazine writing that I'm brave enough to enter regions where others would not dare to enter because there's the clicks trap. But having returned to India in the last years, I realized it is the influence I got as a student in India. Those images, they look like an Indian night. There's a lot of black, and then you have some light spots, and there's usual colorful light.
Yeah.
And that love for strong colors is something that doesn't come out of Germany. It's definitely India.
Yeah. When you look at a lot of documentary photography of India at night, you do see a lot of heavy colors, a lot of contrast. It's really interesting. And now that you say that, it makes a lot of sense. It's you've evolved, into kind of getting into AI and so on. And when you look back at this work, I know you've been spending it seems like a year kind of reviewing a lot of this work. What do you notice was that like about a lot of that work? What are some of these common threads that you're starting to make some connections? Because you have work that goes back early 90s, and what's the big thing that you said you had made a discovery? You see the thing that kind of connects it when we started in our conversation. What is the thing how does it make you feel? What are you noticing?
Well, they are all my children. I like all of them. And the connection is genetically, I would say. It is my interest in the human condition and the unconscious workings of the mind, which is also something I share with Roger Ballen. But the expression is differently. And then, as you will see later, for the last 1.5 years in AI, I only work in black and white. So I'm returning to my roots, which is something that I had planned to do for over a decade. That I had this idea of working with color for 25 years. Would be nice to go back into black and white. And now I'm doing it using AI. And the working with Tanvir was a very good preparation for the AI process, because he took images from our archives and he creates variations. So out of 2-3 images, I get 20 variations. And then I need to evaluate and to choose which one is the best. Is it already done? Does it need something? Yeah. How can I continue? What is missing? And it's the same process as working with an AI image generator. So that collaboration with Tanvir prepared me. And also staging images for 35 years prepared me, because most photographers go out into the world and then they respond. It's about perception. But when you staged images, you have a white cube. It's blank. It's a holodeck. Yeah. And you need to fill it. It's the same with prompting. So I could use all of these things, and skills in working with AI. That's the connection.
Yeah. That is a I'm a fan. So I've been watching you evolve, and I've been watching the AI work evolve, and a lot of this stuff is starting to make a lot of sense, especially when it comes to prompt engineering. I love a word that you let's move to your AI stuff. You're about to. I think that's the next section. But you coined a term called a promptograph. I think it was you that said that, right?
I'm just a promoter. Because no, it was around earlier.
It was.
I saw it first time in a online discussion I had with a Peruvian photographer.
Yeah.
And first I quoted him as the person who invented the term, but he said it had been around somewhere else. Yeah. So very early, I realized it is important to have a different terminology. Coming from philosophy, terminology is important to have a proper discussion.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Really know what you are talking about. And I realized very early that working with AI has things in common with photography, but it's a different workflow. It's a different motivation. It's not photography. It's just too easy to look at the result and say, oh, it looks like photography. Let's call it photography. I think that is very lazy. And so there was a need to call it differently. And promptography for me was something that made sense because it's also much larger than just talking about images that are generated and look like photography. Everything we are doing in AI generating stuff is starting with prompt. Doesn't matter if you generate sounds, moving images, 3D models, whatsoever. The prompting is the first step. So for me, all of this is promptography. And I was looking for a term that is outside of the photo bubble, that is able to explain what's happening on larger terms. Others call it synthography, from synthesis, but for me, the synth,
I like that one.
Terminology gives me too many different associations. As a child of the 70s, I had synthetic clothes. As a child of a teenager of the 80s, there was synthi music and synthi pop, and
there was, I remember that. Yeah,
I have too many associations.
Yeah,
so I prefer promptography or simply AI generated image, because all of this is about image making. And for me, if I could use a pencil, I could use a camera, I could use AI, I could use paint. It's about, I always wanted to create images. The interest of many people that go into photography is to document, to preserve a fleeting moment in time and to be present at a certain location with certain people, give them a voice. That is all valid, and I have many friends that do so, and it's very important that people do it. But it was never my interest. I wanted to create images, and the tool changes. And now I have a tool that I always wanted to have, and I like working with it because I have so many advantages. I can work purely from my imagination, and I work with my experience and the skills I collected over the past 30 years. And I'm happy that I'm not 18 today.
It's really, really interesting. I think the last year has like really surprised a lot of people, especially with how quickly these images were almost photorealistic. I think Midjourney 5 is when I got really freaked out. I was like, wow. And so like, it's hard for like people that aren't image makers or people that don't practice any kind of art to kind of make a correlation between what photography is and what promptography is. And I really personally, I don't know if, do you feel like people are adopting that term promptography, or do you feel like that's starting to kind of land? I also see like, on Instagram now, it says made with AI. You can check it, it says made with AI. So it's interesting. It's really, really interesting. It actually makes me kind of nervous, because of how good it is. I know you enjoy making out of it because you can pull out of your imagination. And when I was doing my research, I was actually making work at the exact same time. And at the time that I was doing it, I was I had developed a body of work, but I was going through like a very personal kind of crisis, and the only imagination I had was kind of dark, right? And so I was actually typing into it like it was a diary, and it was like manifesting these kinds of images for me, and I was just blown away with how it was able to kind of craft. But it wasn't coming from a to your point, a photography perspective. You're not present, capturing a moment or a perspective. You are literally, it's coming from inside out, not outside in. And
Yeah.
I kind of try to explain that when I was doing it, but it just seems like a lot of people see it as a threat. They're not necessarily understanding what this thing is and how it's working. And as you get out there, what is the reception like? What are people's reactions to AI? And I'm sure you've gotten a lot. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it changes. It came in waves.
It does.
And like in all technical revolutions, there is a certain structure that repeats itself. In the early days, they said, it's so bad. It's not good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they look at it and said, oh, yeah, Jesus, yeah, what's going to be the effect? Yeah. And then it's too good. It's a threat. It's a danger. You need to stop it. Yeah. And at some point, people get used to it. When I started to talk about it 2 years ago, it was obvious that all of what was happening since did happen. Yeah. Technology will still improve. It will become even more convincingly. And even like half a year ago, you could create images that are very hard to detect as AI. And in the future, we are having a lot of problems, with all the synthetic images, videos, sounds that are convincing but totally made up. All of this is not news, but it takes time for people to digest and to understand the consequences. And then it depends on the perspective you have. As an artist, for me, it's a wonderful tool. It allows me to be much more effective than in the past. I'm not depending on matter. In the past, I had to transform what is in front of the camera into something else, like I've been showing. Today, I can say, where do I go to? And people don't see that true potential of AI, that it is something for an inner journey. I can generate images with AI in a cellar with no light, I don't need to go outside. I don't need to interact with the world. But if I use the full potential, I'm interacting with myself. That was always my interest, because then I need to define what do I want to be generated. Yeah, I have a system now with 13 text prompt elements, and 5 of them is like the story everybody can define, and 8 of them are relating to my experience as an image maker in a certain medium. And I need to think about this, because I can use that full potential of text prompts, or I can leave it to the AI. But then the AI is going to have the lead and to generate something that is a statistical average. And as an artist, you should do it better. You should really be aware of what you are doing, using that potential in prompting, having the AI as a co-pilot, generating and then evaluating the outcome, and then trying to improve it. What is missing? What can I change to refine and redesign the prompt, and to start again, or to change the workflow, combine different platforms? There's a lot of craft and knowledge you need to work on that level. It's much more than just typing a few words and click generate. And most of the discussion in the past is very low standard. I had discussions with artists on panel talks that think it's the end of the world and the end of creativity and the end of art. And then I think, Jesus Christ, what is your poor definition of art? Yeah, it's not just generate an image that looks beautiful on the wall. What is art about? Yeah, it is an expression of our condition, with all the positive and negative sides and heartbreak moments and fears and hopes. And if an AI is going to create art, it should also show the AI condition. What does it mean to be an AI? We are talking about 2 different species now. The AI is not a human being. So what an AI is generating as art would not mimic us humans. But what people don't see is the AI is not a being. It has no consciousness. We are not even able to define our own consciousness. And what most people don't see is it has no will. It has no intention. There is no intentionality. It needs a human being to start a prompt. And we humans, we have a will since we are born. Yeah, we have needs. We want things. Yeah, as little babies, we want to sleep and eat and shit and drink. And the AI has no needs. And because of sci-fi movies, this is all mixed up. Yeah? The AI becomes this kind of alien creature replacement, now created by us. And many things that we're experiencing now are restaged from ancient ideas, but changing the framing a bit. You might know the story of Narcissus, that was looking into a water surface, seeing himself and falling into love with his own image. And what we are having now with AI is a similar process, but now we are not falling in love. We become afraid of ourselves. And talking about creativity, that is, it's the end of creativity. We can't even define creativity. And this is something I have been researching for a year now. What is your personal definition of creativity?
Are you asking me?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so abstract, and so I'm gonna do the best I can with this. It's in my opinion, it's the ability to problem solve. It's the ability to imagine. It's about going to a place and taking your thoughts and your imagination to a place purely within your mind, and then that creativity manifests itself in different ways, whether that's through a video, through a picture, through a dance, through language, through words, whatever that may be. But I think the key to creativity really is that ability to imagine and allowing yourself the space to imagine. And that creativity, often people tell me I'm creative because I come up with interesting solutions to problems. And often I think, since I have an idea and I've allowed my imagination to craft some kind of vision of what it is that I want to create, now it's for me to get from this point where I have nothing to get to that point. And throughout the whole process of getting to point B, that's where the solving comes in. You solve this, I got to do this. I've got to use these words. I got to do this. You know what I mean? And I've got to use this paint or this camera or whatever, that's where the creativity comes in is almost, I almost see creativity as a part of will. It's that ability to move. It's the ability to do. It's that kind of stuff. And so I hope that defined it.
Well, it's very close to the Wikipedia definitions. Wikipedia defines something that is new, original, and useful.
Yeah, there you go.
But does it help? Yeah. How do you scale it? Yeah. Should it be new globally, continentally? Yeah. Are we talking about a nation, a city, a company, a person? Yeah. Nobody knows. And what is useful? Yeah. The whole planet is created in a structure that anything can be used for something else. Yeah. Even sugar is useful for dentists. So it's a definition that we have. It's like the average on Wikipedia, but I don't know. And then if we have a look at the Wikipedia definition of intelligence, it is using your knowledge experience to solve new problems. But if you are creative and if you are creating or producing something new and valuable, you are solving a problem. No? So what is the difference and between intelligence and creativity? Do I need to be intelligent to be creative? So the deeper you dig, the more questions arise. But still, people are out there that say, oh, creativity is dead, yeah, and AI is intelligent. It is complex. AI is at the same time overrated and underestimated.
I couldn't agree more. It's so interesting. There's so many people that are so fearful of it, and I use AI so much. Image making. I use the Chat GPT. I use AI in so many different aspects, and but I often tell people it's like, Chat GPT is only as good as the question you ask. And so is the image maker. It's only going to give you exactly what you want based on the information that you use. So it's really important to have knowledge about image making per se. Like because I've been a photographer for over 10 years, I maybe 15 years at this point. I had the knowledge. I could tell it all of these extra little things that I would want that actually go into almost like these reflexes when I'm taking a photograph to zoom out because I want a wide, I need this particular exposure, I want this particular angle, all of these things that are like very, angle for the first time I was putting into words. And that by using that kind of information, you were able to do it. However, if I were to just type in, I want a red rabbit on an ocean, it's going to give me a red rabbit on an ocean, but it might not be exactly what I'm looking for. You know what I mean? It requires another level of patience. It requires knowledge. And I think, in my opinion, I think creativity, you ask about what intelligence is, or even knowledge, or to a certain point, I think creativity is that tension, that pressure that requires you to learn as you go. Because when you set out and you imagine something and you want to go in that direction, for you to get there, you need will, You need persistence. You need to learn a whole bunch of things in order to get from A to point B. A lot of that, I think creativity comes in because you learn as you go and you get better as you go. And that's kind of what I was noticing when I was using AI. And so for me, I didn't see it as a threat. But what I saw as a threat was the way we interpreted the images. You know what I'm saying? The way we consume images is the threat to me. It's the way we kind of live a kind of synthetic reality through a phone, like a meter from our face, It's so like, I just was before, you kind of had to be there with photography. Your feet had to be in a position. You had to be looking at something and witnessing something in order for it to kind of capture a perspective. And even at that point, you can even argue if photography is real. But now you have something that can completely generate it based off of whatever narrative that you want. And if you have the creativity, the drive, and the intention in order to make something, you can almost craft any kind of narrative you want. And so that to me is the only thing that concerns me with AI personally. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think about that?
Well, I value all concerns that I've heard so far because AI is huge. It's going to influence or to change most professions, like the digitalization and how the professions will change and if they are going to survive is very difficult to predict. So people are afraid of losing jobs and being able to pay their rent. This is something that is important and then needs to look at. I also see a danger in AI that it can be misused. Like all the tools we created as mankind. It can be used like a knife for cooking and killing. But now what people debate is if that knife can have a will of its own.
Agency. Right. The knife had agency. Yeah.
If it can jump off the table and do whatever it wants.
Yeah.
That is a difference. And the big concern I see talking about images is disinformation. This is also where I'm giving a talk about tonight at journalists here from Argentina. How to produce deepfake, which is really easy now, and the possibilities we have to detect them. But we are going to be at a point where we won't be able to detect them, where we end up with uncertainty all the time. And so what does it mean for us, for democracies? Are we losing facts? That what is going to happen if in a democracy we have no facts anymore? Usually you would say, okay, certain things, this is the problem, these are the statistics and the numbers, this has happened, and now we can debate how to solve it from different backgrounds, parties, perspectives. But if those facts are disappearing, what is happening? We don't know. It's something I'm really concerned about. And it's so easy to generate fakes and to spread it. But here the problem is not AI only. For me, AI is just the new super fuel. But the motor that drives it, and that is going to be a danger for democracies, is social media. And since 2000, for 20 years, between 2000 and 2020, I was working as a freelancer in digital marketing. That is something where I know how it works, also how it has been manipulated all the time, leading to Brexit and the election of Donald Trump and other things that can be influenced. And if you look at social media and how it's used by different parties, it's usually the non-democratic parties that know how to use it the best. And getting voters, especially young voters, on their side. So I think if we talk about disinformation in democracies, we also need to look at social media platforms, and they need to be redesigned.
Yeah.
That is
But then it's like, we have so many unanswered questions, especially when it comes to the dissemination of information. As an American, we thrive. We pride ourselves on freedom of speech. It's like we always are up for that. It's our First Amendment, and especially in the Constitution. And so it's an interesting time, and it's I think social media, was kind of evolving to this point. AI is just throwing gasoline on the fire, don't you think?
Yes, definitely.
That's exactly what it is. It's spreading like crazy. But I'm kind of curious because you are taking a very artistic approach to. I hate using that word, artistic approach. You're using AI as a tool to make new work, and you're making images, but you're also doing videos, which I love the videos that I'm seeing now. So let's take a moment to dive into some of your work in AI. It's fascinating. I think we could literally spend another hour discussing the problems and the problem
the whole day.
Yeah, but I think people are here for the images. So let's
earlier this year. If you really want to know more about it and you're able to speak German, I did a podcast in Germany with PicDrop, and then they said we talk as long as we want to. I said, really? He said, yeah. So we talked 4 hours, and then I said, you really need to edit it. 4 hours is just too much, and he didn't. And I got so much positive response because of this podcast. Yeah? People really listen to it because you can get into details, and then you get more information than in a normal newspaper article.
Exactly.
Let's look at pictures here.
And you can dive into things. It's one of the reasons I enjoy this particular podcast. And I usually go an hour and a half, 2 hours. Is how many opportunities do artists get an opportunity to really dive into their work? You know what I mean? And especially if they're tackling subjects and like you are. Did you intend to be answering the questions about AI, or were you just using it as art? So I guess that's my question. Were you expecting the onslaught of the philosophical question of AI, or were you just making because you were curious? I guess that's my first question.
I don't know if I understand it right, but let me try to explain.
It seems like it was almost accidental that you're having to now, face all these existential questions about AI, when realistically you were just fascinated, I think, correct?
Yeah. When we go back 2.5 years, I started participating in a little workshop of a French photographer and artist that I really appreciate, David Fati. And he experimented in an early version of first version of Midjourney and of DALL-E, and he showed what was possible, and that gave me an overview. And he also recommended to get on the waiting list for DALL-E 2 as a beta tester, and I did. Yeah, I applied with 3 different email addresses, and I got in before him even, and then I got hooked. It was fascinating. Yeah, it was suddenly artistic freedom. Yeah, you put your imagination into words, and then you get images, and you work with them, and it is addictive. Yeah, it was very addictive in the first time, and I tried to do all different things. And then my partner got a diagnosis of cancer. And we spent a lot of time in doctors' offices and hospitals, and the whole treatment was like 1.5 years. Everything's fine now. But all of this happened in parallel. So the only way for me to be creative was to play around with AI in the little breaks I had, sitting at hospitals and doctors' offices, on my mobile. It was also very good to have something that we could talk about that was not about cancer and treatment, and that it was taking off that dramatically. It was something that in the first half year, the second half of 22, I could see it was big, I could see it was creating many, many problems. And because of my connections in the German photo scene and the online talks I did for photo associations in the past, I had a lot of connections. I was the first to ask for interviews, presentations, workshops, and I did. And in January 23, I had 5 interviews per week from German photomedia. And then with the Sony Award, it was becoming bigger. But at the same time, it felt like everything I've been doing in the past, I can use now. I work with it as an artist. I was a freelancer for 20 years in digital marketing, and that meant knowing how the internet works, being not afraid of new technology, and having an understanding of digital things. And philosophy was helpful to reflect what I was doing. And not that many people have been out there that was doing all of these things at the same time. Also, because of my teaching degree, I could put my experience and knowledge into a format that people understood. And but this is something that just happened. It's luck. That the stuff you have been doing for 25 years, suddenly you can use all of it. But life sometimes is like this. In the past, you think, oh, I don't know if this was a wasted time, and I don't know, there was a dead end. But if you keep your eyes open and you're open to whatever happens, there are moments where you can use this to make a difference.
It's you're inspiring. So
let's look at images.
Yeah, let's look at some stuff. Yeah. This first series,
the first series is called Vomit, and it has that title because I realized working with it is something like exploring the Jungian shadow in AI. So the Carl Gustav Jung's psychological idea of the shadow is that we have parts in ourselves that we dislike. We don't want to see it. But if we see it in others, it enrages us. And this idea of the shadow you have in many books and movies, from Dr. Jekyll and Hyde to Fight Club. And the Jungian shadow, what I wanted to do with Vomit was to create images with text that DALL-E refused to do in-painting, out-painting. So I could generate it with text, but it didn't allow me to go further and use more features of the platform. And that was kind of ironic because, hey, you created this image yourself and now you hate it. And now you are telling me if I do it again, you are kicking me from the platform. So I had a lot of fun creating those images. I was kicked off the platform twice. And I re-entered with a different email address and using the same credit card, no problem.
So just to clarify what you're saying here is that these AI image generators, they have a prompt line and you enter in information and it is filtered. So like it is, it'll keep you from making certain things like not safe for work, what they call NSFW kind of content. So what you were doing in a sense was finding the limits of what would the cutoff point was, correct?
Yeah.
And so in these images are almost kind of an expression of what you were making in that process. When I was having this conversation with you, I thought that was really fascinating because there's a lot of people that think AI is limitless. It's this ultimate intelligence or whatever, but there are guardrails in there. There are things that they're not allowing you to do. And that to me kind of already says censorship. I'm not a big fan of censorship in general, but that to me, there's some really ethical questions there. Well, why not? Why can't I make anything that I want? But it's like there's some interesting places there, and this project is kind of at that edge. And talk to me a little bit about, because you had a really interesting way of working around it. So talk to me a little bit about what you were doing. Dive into a little bit deeper, and then take us into some of these images.
Let me see how many I have. Okay. It was my learning by doing. I had no idea of how it works. So I created images that look not really photorealistic. They're somewhere between drawing and photography, which I like. Yeah. That in the middle was one of the first favorites of Roger Ballen, where he says it's a strong image and he doesn't care how it's made. Because it leaves room to your imagination. What do I actually see? And you're trying to fill it. And this is what I loved about that work. And it is working around the censorship that I still do today. You need to experiment because there is no official list of keywords you can't use. And it changes all the time. So in the past, it was possible to say, okay, nudity is not working. So the main censorship of platforms is nudity, violence, VIPs. But that differs from platform to platform. Stable diffusion versions are uncensored, and because they have created the foundation of stable diffusion, the people who created Flux, it's similar, uncensored. And that was a big outroar recently in the press because Flux was integrated in Elon Musk's Grok chatbot, and people realized, holy shit, I can create Donald Trump with a machine gun and Kamala Harris naked and pregnant, or vice versa. And it's possible, but it's possible with all of those platforms if you remove the censorship or if you have a way of working around. So one way of working around with me was in the past creating albinos in white swimsuits in a mud or on the beach, and suddenly you have nudity. Recently, I realized that I wanted to create images of people that eat a lot, and then I wanted to have big bellies. And just the keyword "big belly" in Midjourney opened up a can of worms. Suddenly, I was in the pregnancy category, and I had pregnant women with big bellies, but also nude, and that shows me that those images have been part of the training data. And you discover those things by accident, or somebody else tells you, well, let's have a look at the history of painting. And there's a lot of nudity in painting, Renaissance times and earlier, because it refers to Greek Roman mythology. Recently, I went to a museum, spent 2 hours, looked at all the titles of the images. What are they talking about? What is in the picture? What is the mythology behind? And then I tried to use this in prompting, and it works. Because those paintings have also been part of the training data. And then you say, I want to have a topic like this, but more looking like a photography. Then you can get it. But it's a learning curve. And I think now with Flux being released, now we have early September, early August. It's a new kid on the block, and it's a wild one. And it's very good. Because
very good.
Those people know what they have been doing. If you don't know the history of stable diffusion, funnily enough, it comes out of Germany. It was created at the University of Heidelberg and in Munich. There is a professor of AI in Munich now, Björn Ommer. His team created the technological foundation that we can use this on our own laptop, that we don't need to have huge computing powers or servers somewhere. And they compressed the CPU. And that enables stable diffusion to be an open source, because you don't need that computing power anymore. And that came out of a German university. And Stability AI didn't invent it. What you needed for the first models to work is A, the technology, which came out of the university of the team, and B, the training data. And that was Lion 5B. And Lion is a non-profit organization also based in Germany, in Hamburg, that was created by nerds meeting in Discord, realizing in the early days that something is happening. Then if you don't want to have all the power at the big tech companies, there needs to be open source models, and open source models need to have open source training data. So they started in their private time to set it up. And then there came that guy that founded Stability AI, Emad Mostak, and he approached them and said, you have the technology, you have the training data, you now need to have computing power for the first model. I have the money to pay you to do this. And so he did. And this is why they then renamed the model from latent diffusion to stable diffusion. Everybody thinks that Stability AI has invented it. They didn't. Yeah? And there's a reason why most people that went to Stability AI have left, and Emad Mostak was kicked out by the board from his own company. So the people who are doing Flux now are, strangely enough, also based in Germany in the Black Forest, which there is not that much happening. Yeah. And these are the people that set up the technological possibility at the universities, and then moved to work for Stability AI, and then left because it was awful. So they really know what they are doing. And for me, this came unexpected, I think, for everyone. And if you're using Flux, the hands are nearly perfect. But going back to Vomit. So that is DALL-E. People also think that DALL-E was one of the first platforms, but it wasn't. What the university guy of Stable Diffusion told me, Björn Ommer, is that their technology was released in a paper before, and DALL-E freaked out and released their model DALL-E 2 earlier than they actually wanted. But this is history and details. But it's very interesting how they are all connected in the development of the technology. So Vomit, I did.
It's like an AI gold rush in a way. It was like everyone was working on it, and everyone thought they were doing it in secret. But it all kind of started out on online, open source stuff. And it's fascinating.
It all continues, and the speed is incredible. And what we all share is the constant stress that you can't keep up. Yeah. I'm doing it full time now, and I'm at my limit. I need a team now, because just doing images and moving images is possibly too much, because moving images, so many things are happening, and you have new models suddenly popping up at parts of the world that you don't expect it to happen. And they are all using the knowledge of what has been produced before. And now you can choose, do I want to have an American or a Chinese model or a European model? But now I've chosen. Let's go back to the images. So Vomit, I did for 6 weeks. Then they kicked me out because I think over 50 times they said, no, you can't produce those images. And then when they kicked me out was the week when Stable Diffusion was released. And then it was promising. It says, no censorship, no limitation. So I went to Stable Diffusion and I created those images. Stable Diffusion in the early days of 1.4 and later 1.5 had always mutations. This is why they invented negative prompts, where you tell the AI what should not be in the image. And then you put all the crap in there you don't want to have. But I love those mutations. I wanted to have more of them. And so I said, this is something I can't do in photography. But now I can describe absurd scenarios. And here it's a woman giving birth to a wild boar, giving birth to a man, vomiting a bird who is eating a worm who is giving birth to the first woman. Yeah, so some circular really madness, and the AI had problems to put this into something, and you get those weird mutations. And when I posted them on social media, my friend said, when are you going to stop to post those images? Very hard. And I said, you are kidding. These are the harmless images, because the really good one I can't post on social media. That was very interesting to learn as well, and to see what works if you don't have censorship. And then Ambiphilia was a discovery, to create those images. That's something like this. So it's an accident. I had a very complex text prompt references from the 60s. And then at some moment I continued on my smartphone and I did a typo. So it was just A and I, 2 letters, swapped. And suddenly the whole style changed. And I had this mix between flesh and plastic, and it became like a recipe that I can put on whatever you want. If I use the Stability Diffusion Model 1.5 and all the parameters I had in the past, I can recreate this anytime you want. And that's like the highest level of text prompting that's possible. But what I also see in the last 2 years, people are too lazy to get the full potential of text prompting and to use this. So since earlier this year, it's more and more working with images as material or references, and it's shortcuts. It's not like trying to create this style with text. It's you upload this image of mine and then you tell the AI, I want to have this style, and then it's copied. So those shortcuts become more and more. And this is a copyright problem of the future that I don't know how it should be solved ever.
I saw that series that you had talked about before, and you had started that after I had spoken with you a few years ago, and I got really excited. And I saw you kind of evolving.
After I was kicked out of DALL-E, I later returned and did more experiments and created those images. The reason for me to get into AI initially was a long time project, trauma porn, talking about trauma in World War II. This is why they all have this 1940s style. And as a result of this, I created a electrician image that became so famous because of the refusal of the Sony Award. I continued to work in this black and white style because I was invited by a gallery in Panama that show abstract art only. And then I tried to create this fusion of abstract art and photography that I started with the 1940s feeling. And I enjoyed it a lot. And you need to go to different stages. You can't do this with text prompt only. And I learned a lot just doing this work, and I still like it. Parallel, I did this trauma porn work that is the strongest, I think, so far as a concept, and I got the strongest response. My father was born in 1924. He participated in the war when he was 16. He survived, and he never talked about it. After his death in 2000, I inherited images of his childhood. I started to collect images from flea markets in Germany. And with all of this material, I created this work. Also having Tanvir on my side to balance out my German perspective, because we don't want to talk about Germany and how it fucked up with creating the Nazis and starting World War II. But it's the phenomenon of a totalitarian system. Even suppressing people or attracting them, gearing up for war on the atrocities, and then the aftermath. So what I did here, Tanvir and I, we were using the archive of vintage pictures I collected for 20 years, him to create his kind of process and me to create new images out of it. And you see on the right side, it's an installation shot. It becomes wilder and wilder. And I show you a process before we get there. So you have authentic images, you blend them into something, but then you don't stop. You think, how far can I take it? Yeah. How far can I get to an Olympia image and having a German meat dish that also looks like the helmet of a soldier? And that is my direction then, to take it further, because most people would stop here. But another thing would be those authentic images. To create a new one, you could stop here. But for me, then, this is just a starting point. How do I get this into something else? Yeah, okay, there is a wasteland, a destroyed city, a soldier, and people that look like ants. But what if we have another version of that meat dish, and now there's just a big bone left, yeah, and the little people are like ants crawling up that bone into nowhere. And that is something that we did. We've also did in-painting, out-painting of Tanvir's work. That is how he works with the images he gets, and he paints on it, and he puts glue around, and then acid and fluid on top. Then he photographs an object. And I take it further, I mirror it, and I put different landscapes on top and create a new image. So we have different workflows, but at this point, they just merge and form three parts. And that's what I said before. First part, totalitarian system. Second part, war. Third part, aftermath. And it was very important to have the real vintage photography in there. And these are the ones that are on this wooden table. In the exhibition, they have a brown frame. And they interact. Yeah, it's like what was in front of the camera and then an inside picture. But if you look at the installation, you don't know what is more crazy. Yeah, the vintage 1914 photography or what we did out of it. So I'm clicking through now. I don't know if you're able to show part 2. There's usually a trigger warning because it's real photography from World War II and dead people. This is it. And then what we create out of it. So the ones that have a brown background are real. And then this is the aftermath. And the installation, over 200 elements, look like this. Different sizes, different flags, different parts. And you can spend hours there just looking at the interaction. So, but it's very important to see that everything that is framed in those brown wooden frames is authentic and vintage. And the rest is done by us. And the electrician is part of it in a different version because it was always part of it. And people come with strong responses. I showed it in 3 different places over Europe. Whole Europe was traumatized. Everyone has parents, grandparents that survived the war and never talked about it. And then the people in the exhibition, they start to research their own family tree. Yeah. How was my family in that time? Yeah. How did they behave? Yeah. What happened to them? And because of trauma, if you keep it in, it's a record on repeat. That's the war part. And if you change it, this is something that came up in a debate with my partner, who is a psychologist. The only way to get out of this traumatic repeat is to change it. So we are using the images of the time and we are changing it. By changing and working it, it's a kind of trauma therapy at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that before. Yeah.
So,
but you're kind of, instead of being that's usually a mechanism for personal trauma, but you're kind of doing it on a larger society kind of country kind of trauma, or even region, continental trauma. That's fascinating. It really is.
It was also very important to do it with Tanvir. He has different trauma in his region. But it was really pushed forward by the attack of Russia on Ukraine, because most of the images that you can find online and taken by German soldiers are taken in what is Ukraine today. So while I was seeing what was happening in Ukraine in the news, I was seeing what was happening in Ukraine in the 40s. Yeah, and that was very weird having this in parallel. But it's not a German perspective. All of this is happening over and over again. It's just the countries and the cultures are changing. but the structures remain the same. And the installation in the end becomes like this. It's a constant evolving process. And from images that have been a wallpaper, it's now printed on cardboards, and will continue in the future. So that is the stuff I have been doing, also working with images, playing around with moving images, and all the images I've done in the past, they can move now. And this is one of my favorites. It's the me video that you can possibly also get from me as a file if you want to. And what it does is you start with an initial image and you create mostly 5 seconds, and you need to direct the AI. What is happening after? And then you can add 5 more seconds and 5 more seconds and 5 more seconds. And if you do it well, you can end where you started. And I have many of those little circular videos where they are still not stories like most of the videos you see. Yeah, most of the conventional short movies have a funny ending or a solution. There is no solution in my videos. They are played on loop. They will repeat over and over again. It's never ending stories. And what I've been doing recently is trying to use the technology as it is today and the quality, but still show sceneries and bodies where you see the mistakes. It's very important for me that it's not 100% real, that there are hints that show you, no, people don't look like this. They are not having mutations like this. On the first view, it's convincing, but if you look closely, you will find the mistakes. And I still like to keep it because everything else can be perfect. And it's still open, like the photography I did in the past, where you don't know what has been happening here. How are they related? To whom belong the feet on the floor or the hand that comes out of the door? And that is something for you just to fill up with your own imagination. And I don't know what's next. It's still evolving.
I am blown away. The installation, it reminds me a lot of your earlier installations and some of that early work. And you know what's really, really interesting is your collaboration. How that collaboration has even evolved into this new medium. It's fascinating. The videos are really, really quite. They take me. I see them on social media, and I have to stop, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And so I'm blown away. I think you are really kind of pushing this and kind of making your own style. And it's. I like to tell people, I'm like, you know, if you just kind of just do the prompt as just a simple sentence and make an image, you kind of are following a general aesthetic that particular platform has, whether it be DALL-E or Midjourney or whatever. And you can tell it has kind of a general aesthetic. But I think what you have done with your own prompt engineering and your own creative process is create kind of your own aesthetic. I can't really tell you which model you're using, and I can usually tell you exactly which one people are using based on the output. But with you, I think what you're doing is you're taking it those extra steps, you're going that extra level, but you're still kind of maintaining your own personal view. And that to me is amazing. And I have to applaud you on that. And this is one of the reasons I was so excited about having this conversation with you today, is because you are still finding your touch, your own vision, your own kind of signature in something that could easily not have a signature to it. Photography is still very similar in that regard. A lot of people take the sunset image and how can you tell it's yours? You know what I mean? And it's really, really hard to find your signature, even in photography. But in AI, through prompt engineering, it's also has the same challenge. You have that same jump, and I think anybody that studies your work and looks at you have made that jump, and I think that's why you're so popular these days. You're in Argentina right now doing artist talks, and you have many more on the list. And so anyway, just thank you so much for doing what you do, and thank you for coming on the show. I just have one final question for you, and I think a lot of people are going to have conversations even about this particular episode. So, I have a lot of people that follow this show that are artists and makers themselves. And I always take one moment to ask anybody that I'm talking to see if they have any sage advice, any kind of thing that you would tell makers out there, that you would give any kind of, I don't know, nugget of wisdom for us. So I've been reframing it too to ask, what would you tell your younger self, to help you get here? So what would you share there?
Well, it is important to be aware why you are making, why you do what you do. And I realize it is giving me energy. It's part of my life. So that means it's not important if I sell. It's not important if somebody likes it or not. And up until for 25 years doing photography, 30 years, I was selling 5 pictures. And I was not connected to the scene. And I was living in Australia. When I came back, I started portfolio reviews. And then people said, why don't I know you? Yeah. And then I said, well, nobody was interested. Yeah. It was like I'm on a ship and I get stranded on an island. And then 10 years later, somebody else picks me up and I have a long beard and I look crazy. And people say, you are strange. And I said, of course I'm strange. Yeah. I've been doing this all by myself, for a long time.
Yeah.
And that is also good because I'm independent of an outside feedback. And the most beautiful moments that tell me why it's worth being an artist is not being in the press, being interviewed or something. It is then moments in time where I feel it's worth it. Yeah. All the years of having nobody interested, no money, several jobs to juggle. There was one former friend of mine that I met online, and she loved my images, and she had a trauma, and she told me that my images help her to be able to sleep. Yeah, and I said, wow, what can you expect from your work? And with the electrician, I got so many emails and messages. It took me half a year to respond to all of them. And there was, no, I really did, except 2, but it was an effort. If people make an effort to approach me, I think it's important to respond. And I know I have been the one sending emails to others, and it was always very special when I got an answer, because usually you don't. There was a poet from Italy who thanked me for the image, and he said it doesn't matter how it was produced. He's living with his mom. His mom has dementia. And the situation is what he sees in the image. And it's also a kind of consolation for him. And I think these are the moments that are very precious. Yeah. And you can't translate them into money or something. And fame of all of this can be over. Yeah. I've been in the limelight now for 1.5 years. Yeah. I have been out of the limelight over 50 years. And since 22, I expect, it's going to be over next week. Yeah. My partner is always laughing. I said, it can be over. And then I'm back to my old and normal life. But I'm still do the same stuff that I'm doing today.
Yeah.
And what else can you do? Yeah. As an artist, there's only one thing that nobody can take you. Yeah. It's the freedom to create what you want, what you like, what you appreciate. I was always my target group. And as an artist, I don't have a target group. It's not a product. Yeah. It's an expression of being a human being. And most people are not able to do so.
Yeah. Know your why. Know your why. I think that's great advice. And it's really interesting. I've been kind of watching the last year and a half for you, and I've been cheering you on here in Paris. So I've been super thankful for your contribution, even in my studies. You really influenced me a lot, and I always like introducing your work to new people. So I'm one of those people out there that's spreading the good word for you. So thank you so much for coming on. Tell people how they can connect with you. You could share your website and also your Instagram or whatever social media you have right here.
Well, it's very easy to find me if you can spell my family name. It's eldagsen.com. And on Instagram and social media, it's always Boris Eldagsen. And you and I can possibly have a coffee in Paris. Yeah, I'm always in Paris for the Paris Photo Fair in November. And this is also where you can find me. I'm usually there 4 days or so. And I'm also in summer in France at the Festival Rencontre for a whole week. And that's the easiest way.
Awesome. That's great. I'm going to take you up on that. Yeah. I will definitely take you up on that. So thank you so much for coming on. Really, it was great.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking. And let's talk about AI video in a year or so.
It'll be great. Yeah. And to all those that have made it this far, thank you so much for joining us on the Urbanaut Podcast. If you like content like this, please consider liking, sharing, and commenting down below. All of that helps us, and it helps support the show. It helps us with this thing called an algorithm that kind of drives our content. So please consider helping us in that way by liking, sharing, and commenting. And if you feel compelled to help us a little further, please consider joining us as a paid subscriber on our Patreon. That is a great way to support us there as well. And as always, we'll see you next time.